Well, hey there, River Point. We are out here today asking people what they think about God.
I'm not saying there isn't one, but I don't. There could be, there might be, but I don't think there is one, but there might be. I don't know.
Okay, so maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
We're not really sure.
Yeah,
Think anybody
exactly.
can be sure? Is that possible, or you taking the stance that no one can know?
Right now, I feel that nobody could know. Yeah.
So who do you think God is? Like, describe him to me.
He goes by many names. Allah, God. There's many names for him.
God, no God.
No God.
Complete atheist?
Not complete. I don't believe in the God from the Bible.
He can be called Allah, he can be called Buddha, he can be called anything.
Buddha's not technically a God. Buddha's a spirit. That's the
God's
spirit
God.
of God. It's got spirit of God.
It's the spirit of God.
It's everywhere. God is everywhere.
I believe, one way or another, all gods are the same. It's just how we put the perspective on it. But the concept of God, that's how I look at it.
So we might have different perspectives on God. We're both right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. As I was preparing for this week's sermon, I came across that video online and thought it would be a good one to show because it was produced by another church. I think it was in Texas. You guys know how I can tell it was in Texas? Because you could see the sun. Yeah, I'm just saying. And trust me, I'm from Oklahoma. That's the only positive thing I can say about the state of Texas. No, but it was just really interesting because I think it shows some of the diversity of how different people in our world view religion and view God. And is that God with a big G or a little g, or is there one, are there many, or all religions just kind of leading to the same place? And that's kind of the idea we're talking about today. We're actually kind of continuing on this morning in a teaching series that we're calling Q&A. And basically a couple of weeks ago, we just sort of asked you all as a congregation, what questions do you have about God, about Jesus, about the church, about how that impacts our life? Because we really are committed to answering the questions that you've got and trying to help you see how the teaching of God as reflected in the Bible can make a positive impact in our lives and in our world today. And there were a lot of questions about other religions and kind of how they relate to each other. Are they all just sort of different paths up the same mountain? Do they all lead to the same God but by different things? Do they say the same thing but in different ways? And how does Jesus fit into all of that too? Especially, what do you do with these very exclusive claims that the followers of Jesus make when they say that, no, Jesus is the only way, Christianity is the only way? How does that make sense with all these other religions in the world? I mean, think about even our community, right? We've got thousands of students from all around the world coming in, so there's a real diversity in religious backgrounds and thoughts. And what do you do in a world that values tolerance and religious pluralism with this claim that these Christians make that Jesus is the only way? Well, just so you know, it's not actually the Christians who claim that. Those claims actually come from the words of Jesus himself. He was very clear about who he was and what he said he came to do. At one point in John's biography of Jesus, he says this. He says, I am the way, and I am the truth, and I am the life. And it's not just sort of modern followers of Jesus who make this exclusive claim. Even the people who very first followed him. If you look in the book of Acts, which is the history of these earliest followers of Jesus, his followers there understood that this is what he was saying, and they make similar claims. At one point they say that salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. So what do we do with all that? That's the real question with these sort of exclusive claims. Well, if you have ever wondered about this or thought about some of these questions, you are in luck, because I'm sure that over the next 25 minutes, we will just wrap all this up with a bow. We'll answer every question you've ever had about other religions in the world. Now, obviously, we're not going to get that done. What we're going to try to do, I'm just going to try to answer these questions as best and as honestly as I can. And when we're done with the service today, I'm going to be right outside those doors, and I will try to take time afterwards to answer any other question you might have to the best of my ability. If I don't know the answer, I'll be happy to say, I don't know. I'll try to point you to maybe some resources that can help. But if you're here this morning, And maybe you wouldn't consider yourself a Christian. Maybe being here today is just kind of part of your own journey in exploring faith. Or maybe you come from a different religious background or you believe what a different religion teaches. Well, I'm hoping that today can be helpful just in terms of kind of clarifying what it is that Christianity claims. And if you're here this morning and you are a follower of Jesus, but maybe you wondered about some of these things at times. You've thought about these questions. You're not sure how to answer them and how to make sense of them in today's world. Well, again, I hope that today can be helpful to you. I do want you to know if you've got questions, your questions are always, always welcome here. I say this over and over again, but I really firmly believe that if God is not big enough to help you find answers to your questions, he is not a God worth following. He's not afraid of your questions. Neither are we. Well, I am a little bit, but not too much. So we'll go ahead and just try to jump into this, I guess. So I thought this might be a good way to get started this morning. How many of you guys are familiar with this bumper sticker? Have you ever seen this bumper sticker? Anyone? Yeah, a lot of these bumper stickers around. Basically, it takes different symbols from major religions around the world and uses them to spell out this word, coexist. Now, personally, I'm a big fan of religions peacefully coexisting with each other. I think our world would be a better place if people were nicer to each other as a general rule. But one of the things that I've found in talking with people about this is that there's almost an idea that lies behind this. Like when you put the bumper sticker on there, for many people, they're not just saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could coexist? For a lot of people, they kind of reflect the way of thinking about religion that we saw in that video. It's almost like they think, well, of course these different religions should be able to coexist because at their core, they're all saying the same things anyway. They're all pointing to the same place anyway, so why shouldn't they be able to peacefully coexist? There's a quote by the singer Madonna, who I think is kind of reflective. Not a lot of Madonna fans out there. Personally, I thought her work really went downhill after Vogue, but no, there's an interesting quote here that I wanted to share with you guys this morning. She says, I do believe that all paths lead to God. It's a shame that we end up having religious wars because so many of the messages are the same. Now, again, whether you agree with that statement or not, I think that's a pretty common thought about religion out there. I think it's a common thought kind of behind the coexist bumper sticker. It's definitely in the water. And here's the crazy thing about this quote from Madonna. She's not entirely wrong. There are an awful lot of commonalities that the different world religions have together. They're not saying completely different things all the time. In fact, there was a really fascinating gentleman named C.S. Lewis who was a follower of Jesus and a professor in England. And at one point, as part of his own sort of faith journey, he did this study where he went to the original documents of all these different world religions and read them and compared them and tried to see where are they the same, where are they different. And he realized that there was a number of things that all these different world religions had in common. There was a sort of common set of values. And he writes about it in a book called The Abolition of Man, if you're ever interested in reading that. But one of the things he found, he said, okay, if you read through all of these things, that there are some common values that most of these world religions have in common. Right? Most of them, no matter where they are, no matter where you come from, they're going to encourage you to do these things. That we should be accountable for our own actions. We should honor our father and mother. We shouldn't harm other people by what we do or by what we say. That should actually say word or deed, not word or dead. Like for somebody with a master's degree in English, I have terrible grammar and I just can't spell worth a lick. So anyway, we'll get that fixed. You shouldn't have sex with somebody who's not your spouse. You should be honest in your dealings. You should care for those weaker than yourself. And you should be kind to your brothers and your sisters. Right? So these are kind of those things that all of these different religions have in common. And just some examples of that so you can see kind of the source documents, what we're talking about. So this idea about honoring your father and your mother, being respectful to your parents. So there's an ancient Hindu document, the Janet, that says this. It says, anyone who fails to honor them, he's talking about mom and dad, every work of piety that person does is in vain, right? Like if you don't honor mom and dad, all the rest of the stuff you do just doesn't matter. Obviously, the Jewish tradition and the Ten Commandments, right? Honor thy father and thy mother. Even in the Greek philosophical tradition, Epictetus had this list of duties that all good people should do, and he included on that list the command to care for your parents. So that's one of those common themes. Or being honest would be another example of that. Again, you go to that sort of the ancient Chinese tradition in the Analects. It says, the master said, be of unwavering good faith, right? Be a person of good faith in what you say. Again, you go back to the Hindu tradition. It says a sacrifice is obliterated by a lie, and the merit of alms by an act of fraud. Like, if we're not honest people, we undercut what we do that's good. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And this is my personal favorite one, the Nastrand, which is sort of the Norse version of hell. In Nastrand, I saw the perjurers. It's just this picture, all those perjurers, they're all down there burning in Norse hell. I kind of wonder, is Norse hell hot or is it cold? But anyway. So here's the thing, there's some real commonalities, right, among these different religions and some of the things that they advocate for, and they kind of center around this common moral core. And the ancient Jewish and Christian writers, they realize this. They recognize that there was truth in this, and they talk about it in terms of their own worldview, by saying that God has sort of written these things on the human heart. He's hardwired it into human DNA. So Paul, who was an early Christian leader, when he was writing to a group of Christians in Rome, he said this. He says, indeed, when Gentiles, right, people who aren't of my religious tradition, when these Gentiles who don't have the law, that is, they don't have access to my religious texts and sacred scriptures. So when these people who don't have my religion and don't have my books, when they do by nature the things that my religion requires, they're a law of themselves, even though they don't have the law. And then look what he says. He says, they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts. So there are some things in common, right? Something about how we are built and hardwired as people. There's sort of this common buy-in and understanding of these kind of base level morality things. So looking at that, seeing these things in common, can we go back to that quote from Madonna and the bumper sticker and say, you see, they were right? These religions, they've got a lot of stuff in common. They are all paths leading to the same place. There's a picture I think that you often see of this, is this idea that, there's this mountain. And up at the top of the mountain, there's God, however people want to define him. And all these different religions, they're just taking different approaches to the summit, right? They're different paths leading up to the same mountain, but they all get to the same place. So when we look at kind of the common things that they share, can we say, I think this is true? And I don't think we can. I think we can say that there are some things that are in common, but there's a problem. Right? If we go back to this list, we look at sort of these common morality things that they all have in common. It doesn't take us very long to look at this list and realize that we all have a challenge here. There's a problem because we don't do this, right? I mean, all of us as people, as individuals, corporately and individually, we have a hard time actually keeping all of these laws, all of these commands. I mean, all of us can think of times when we weren't honest, right? When we harmed other people by what we said or by what we did. I mean, you think about the 20th century, and sometimes people make the argument that humanity is sort of evolving and perfecting in terms of their moral aptitude. There were more wars in the 20th century and more divorces in the 20th century than all of the other centuries kind of combined up until that point. And those same trends are still going on in the 21st century. So obviously there's just a real and a fundamental problem with humanity in terms of how we try to even keep these sort of basic agreed upon moral commandments. And that's really where you start to see the difference in these different religions, because when you look at the different religions as a whole, where they really start to separate from each other is in how they define the problem and in how they propose a solution to the problem, right? How do we fix what's going on, what's broken in us and what's broken around us? So one thing that I think is really helpful to do is to come up with a common set of questions and then ask those questions to each different religious tradition, see the answers that they themselves give, and then you can kind of make an apples to apples comparison of the different religions and what they claim. So what I want us to do this morning is just take some time. We're going to look at 4 questions. Right? The questions are, who is God? Right? How does each religion define God and who God is? Who is Jesus? What's the solution? Right? When we look at this problem, we acknowledge there's this issue. What's the solution to that? And what happens when we die? Is there a life after life? And if so, what does that look like? So looking at those 4 questions, we can just apply them to sort of looking at different religions and see what kind of answers we come up with. And so what I thought we'd do, we don't have time to look at every world religion today, because there's a lot of them. But I thought we could just kind of look at the top 3 in terms of the number of people who are believers or adherents to each faith. So we're going to start at number 3 and work our way up. So number 3, let's take a minute and look at the Hindu tradition. People say there's somewhere around 1 billion people who follow the Hindu tradition in the world today, a little less than that. Kind of coming up with accurate numbers for people who are participants in different faith traditions, that's more art than science. But just think around 1 billion people in the world today kind of follow this as a religious way of life. So how does Hinduism answer these questions, right? So God? Well, there's lots of them, right? Lots of gods. The gods are all over the place. In some definitions, there's just one, this sort of Brahman universal oversoul, but all these other gods are parts of that God, and they're sort of all the way out there. So who's Jesus? Well, Jesus is a good guy. He was a good man. He was a good teacher. He could be one of the gods. He could be a son of one of the gods. But there's nothing unique about him in terms of the access that he gives us to God. There's nothing divine in and of his nature that somehow helps us in who he is. So he's really not special in that way in the Hindu tradition. And in terms of the afterlife and salvation, the solution to the problem, where the problem is that we all have this karmic debt that we carry because of mistakes that we have made in other lifetimes. So when we die, we're reincarnated, and we get a chance, essentially, with each new life to kind of hit do-over, to start again, to live life better. And as we live life better, the next life we get to start again and live a life that's a little bit better. And eventually, when we finally get it right and we live a good life, the reward for the afterlife is that essentially the essence of who we are is kind of dissolved into the universe, becomes one with Brahman, sort of the universal Godhead nothingness. That's nirvana as it's defined. So that's what the Hindu tradition teaches and how it tries to answer those questions. So let's shift gears now and we'll talk about Islam. So Islam is the second largest religion in the world today. 1.3, 1.5 billion people, something like that. It's the fastest growing religion in the world. So how does it answer the questions? In terms of God, who is God? Well, there is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Jesus. Jesus is actually very highly respected and revered in the Islamic tradition. He is seen as a prophet, really a uniquely powerful and influential prophet. But he is just a man. He is not God. There is nothing divine about him. So he's very different from how we would understand him in the Christian tradition. And in terms of the solution to the problem and the afterlife, right? When we die, we're going to go to one of two places, either to paradise or to hell. And the way that we figure out how we're going is that when we get to the end of our life, it's almost like you have to picture a scale. And all of the good deeds of our lives are weighed on one side of the scale, and the bad deeds of our life are weighed on the other side of the scale. And the good deeds, especially as it pertains to sort of living out the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith, the daily prayers, the alms, Ramadan, things like that, those things are weighed. And we hope that Allah is going to kind of tip the scales towards justice, or towards mercy, but ultimately it comes down to the deeds that we do as we live. That's how it determines where we go. So Christianity. So Christianity is the largest religion in the world today. Around 2.2 billion people in the world are Christians. So how does Christian faith answer these questions? So who is God? Right, we believe there is one God who exists eternally as the Trinity. So 3 persons, 3 in 1. There's God the Father, God the Son, Jesus Christ, and God the Holy Spirit. So Jesus then obviously holds a very unique place in that he is God. He is both fully God and fully human who came and lived here on earth and lived his life in such a way that through his death and his resurrection, we now have access back to God. So Jesus is really unique in that. He's not just a man. He's not just a good teacher. He's not just a prophet. And then the problem. What's the solution to the problem and the afterlife? Right, well, the afterlife is also kind of a couple of options. There's a life forever with God or apart from him. But really, where Christianity is very different than many other religions is in how it defines the problem and the answer to the problem. Right? The problem is that we're all more broken than we're ever going to know. But the answer, sort of the unique answer of Christianity, is that we are also more loved than we can ever imagine. Right? There is no way for us to fix the problem on our own. We're just too broken to do that. But because of the incredible love that God has for us, right? Like it says in John 3:16, God so loved the world, he sent his son. Right? Because of the love that God has for us, he sent his son into this world to take that sin upon himself, to take that brokenness upon himself, to die in our place, and somehow through his death and his resurrection, provide a way back into a right relationship with God and with each other. And that's not something we earn. That's not something that Jesus sort of weighs the good and the bad and decides where we are on that scale. No, the only way to sort of receive that is just to simply receive it as a free gift of grace from a good and loving Father who wants to be united with these children he loves so much. So that have a real difference with the Christian faith. And once we do that, then that's when life begins to change. Because when we receive that gift of grace from God, we receive forgiveness, we also receive the power of the Holy Spirit, right? God's empowering presence comes and lives in us. And that's what begins to give us the power to live differently, to change how we live, to live the lives God created us to live, and to continue to become the people that God created us to be. So those are the differences in these kind of major world religions as best I know how to describe them. And so the question then I think that you've got to ask then is it really fair to look at that, seeing that the differences are there? Is it fair to look at them and say, I think all these religions are really saying the same thing. They're leading to the same place. I really don't think it is. If we kind of go back to that mountain analogy, this is the best way that I've found at least to describe this. Right? They're not all the same mountain leading, different paths leading up to the same God. I think if you look at different religions, what you see is they're different mountains. They're in the same mountain range. Right? There's sort of a common shared base elevation, if you want to think about it that way. There's some common core, that morality that we looked at. So there are definitely some areas of similarity, some teachings that are the same. But when you get to a certain point, they begin to make very different claims about themselves and about where we're going and about how we get there. So in that sense, they're really much more like different peaks in a mountain range. They share some stuff in common at the bottom, but they go different places. The peaks where you find yourself when you get to the top of the peak is very different, and the path to get there is very different. So I really don't think it's fair to look at different religions and just look at what they have in common and say, I think they're all leading to the same place. I think they're all saying the same thing, whether they know it or not. So that's kind of how I would try to answer that question. Are they all the same? What's similar about them? What's different? Are they all leading to the same place? But what do we do about the other big question that you all had? That question about these exclusive claims that Christians make about their faith and their belief. And what does that do to sort of billions of other people around the world that don't believe that? Because again, today when you look at claims like that, it can seem very arrogant almost for Christians to say, well, we've got the way, nobody else has it, you need to get on board or you need to get out. And it's just interesting. I want to share with you guys a passage. Again, it was written by Paul, this early Christian leader. And I just want to look at it. You can sort of see how he frames this up. So he says this. He says, for even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there's but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and from whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. Now, if you're here this morning and you are a participant in a different faith tradition, I could understand that reading that quote could seem very insulting, right? Where does Paul, this guy from the first century, get off calling my God a so-called God, right? That seems pretty demeaning. And if you're here this morning and you are a Christian, you would consider yourself a follower of Jesus, and you struggle with kind of wondering, how is it that so many people in the world see our truth claims as being arrogant? I just would encourage you to take a minute and try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't believe what you believe. Maybe it's someone who's part of another faith tradition, or it's someone who's agnostic. They're just not sure what they believe or what you can even know. I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes and you read through this, it's not hard to imagine how they would hear these words. And I think it just gives us some sympathy and some empathy to understand, why do they find these claims to be so difficult to buy into? What is it that's so hard and so challenging about this? So the question then becomes, what do we, as followers of Jesus, for those of us who are, how do we try to respond to that question when people look at verses like this and say, it's really arrogant for you to say that? We live in a world that values tolerance and religious tolerance above all else, and there's billions of people around the world who don't believe this. How can you make that claim? Well, if I were to try to answer that, this is probably the best way that I would know how to do it. I think the first thing that I would say is that, first off, just so you know, it's not just Christianity that makes claims about exclusivity. Most religious traditions, in some way, shape, or form, say we've got a special window on the truth that others don't have. But we're talking specifically about sort of a response from the Christian community this morning. So I think if someone were to say, essentially, where do you get off saying this? I think what I would try to start out with by saying is, look, one of the things, the decision that I made when I became a Christian was to say that Jesus is the Lord and leader of my life. So I'm actually not the person making claims here. So you guys heard that too, right? just checking. Sometimes I just never know. No, I'm not actually the person making claims here, right? As we've seen in John, Jesus was very clear several different times. He said, I am the way, right? Nobody gets to the Father except through me. He was very clear about what he claimed about himself. So if he's God and I'm not, and I'm following him, I need to let him speak for himself. So when I, as a follower of Christ, make these claims about Christianity being the only way, these are not my claims, right? These are the claims that the founder of our religion actually had. So I'm just trying to honor him by faithfully presenting what it is that he said. Now, what do you do with that claim? Right? If Jesus claimed to be God, so there's only a couple of different options there, right? Either he actually is who he says he is, or he's intentionally lying to us, in which case he's kind of sociopathic and evil, or he's nuts, right? He's crazy, and he somehow thought he was God when clearly he's not, because people don't do that. So it's got to be one of those options. Maybe there are others, but those are the only ones I can think of, right? Either he was right, he was lying, or he's crazy. So all I can say then is we've all got to figure out, what do we do with that? What is our assessment of Jesus, and how do we respond to that? And all I can say is that I have trusted that Jesus is who he says he is. And when I made the decision to do that, I did it with sound mind. I had some good reasons for doing it. But I've experienced in my life that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he can do what he says he can do. Because of the relationship that I have with him, I found joy, right? I found life. I found forgiveness. I found an answer to that problem that we all wrestle with, right? I know that I am more broken than I'm probably ever going to know. But in him, I've also realized that I am more loved than I could ever imagine. So in my own personal experience with him, I've found him to be who he says that he can be. And I just think that for every person, if they were to take him up on that offer and explore the claims of Christ for themselves, I trust that God wants to do for you in Jesus what he did for me in Jesus. That he can be for you what he has been for me and for 2.2 billion other people around the world. So just would encourage people to realize these are not my claims, and I'm not trying to back this up by my own logic. Instead, I just want to say that I've experienced that he really can do what he says he can do. And just would encourage you, I trust that he wants to do this for all people, and that if you were to put your trust and faith in him, you would experience that as well. Because we are all more broken than we can ever know, but we're also more loved than we can ever imagine. And here's the thing, right? If this isn't true, if Jesus isn't God, then none of this really matters, right? We can all leave this place, we can brush him to the side, we can do whatever we want to because nothing else matters. But if he is who he says he is, then nothing else really matters either, right? If he is who he says he is, then that absolutely can change not just my world, but it can help us through his power change this world as well. So all of us have to do the work of figuring out what is it that we actually believe about Jesus, who he is. And I hope that this morning, that this time together, I really hope it hasn't come across as heavy-handed or sort of trying to beat you into, you got to think this, you can't think that. I really just wanted to try and honestly and as accurately as I could say, hey, this is what I understand that these different religions say. This has been my experience with the Christian faith. And just encourage you, wherever you are in your own faith journey, to keep taking steps forward, to keep asking good questions, to keep looking to God's word and God's people to see how they can help you answer those questions. And as we finish up our time together this morning, we're going to sing a final song. And the lyrics to these songs, I think, really give us an opportunity to reflect on some of the things that I've talked about this morning. And one of the things that I've often found to be unique about the Christian faith compared to other religions is that it's one of the few places that consistently describes God as a good and a loving Father, right? A God who cares about us, a God who so loved the entire world that he was willing to take some significant hits and personal losses in order to bring broken humans back to him. So for all of us, as we wander through life with questions, and some of which are very hard to answer, just my hope and my prayer is that you would search for answers, at realizing that you are more loved than you could ever imagine. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for the chance to be here together today. God, there are a lot of questions out there, and I know I haven't answered all of them and may have raised more questions for people than they had when they got here. But one of the things that we just really trust, that I personally trust and believe to be true about you, is that even though this is a big room with lots of people, we come from lots of different places, you have the unique ability and power to meet each one of us exactly where we are, that you love us, God, you know us by name, and that you are able and willing and wanting to speak the words of a good and loving Father into our lives. So God, I just pray that wherever we are today as individuals, just pray that you would show up, that through the power of your Holy Spirit, you would speak to each of us. You would help us know that while we're more broken than we can ever know, you love us. You love us more than we could ever imagine. So God, help each of us know what's the next right step. All of us are on this journey, a journey through life, a journey to explore and understand faith, understand God and who you are. So I just pray you would help each of us take the next right step, whatever that might be, and just give us the wisdom to know what it is and the guts to take it.